What is up, guys? Well, us horror fans every single year dread one thing more than anything else, and that is January horror releases. For the longest time, not just in the horror genre, but just movies in general, January and even February to an extent were always known as the dumping ground. Inevitably, business slows down significantly after the holidays, and everybody's just taking it slow in the first couple months of the year. And so that's typically where studios would dump all of the movies they had little confidence in, knowing they're not going to make a whole lot of money because they're not very good, with the rare exception of a genuinely good movie that actually takes hold of the box office in January, or maybe some carryover Oscar love from the holiday months. But for the most part, it was always a pretty safe bet. If a horror movie's getting released in January, it's probably going to suck. But there have been a number of exceptions over the years. So today I figured it'd be fun to talk about 10 horror films that released in the month of January that I'm actually a big fan of. So this is going to be my top 10 January horror releases. Let me know yours down in the comment section below. Starting off at number 10, we've got My Bloody Valentine 3D, just a fun slasher film. I've never been a huge fan of the original film, nor if I'm like a massive fan of this 3D film, but if I'm in the mood to watch Harry Mason tear some people up with a pickaxe, I actually prefer this one. I think this one's a lot of fun. I didn't have the pleasure of watching it in theaters where I could actually get the 3D effect, but even watching it at home, this is just a good old-fashioned schlocky horror film, a schlocky slasher film with a CW cast, one of which is Jensen Ackles, who I'm an absolute fanboy of. So I've always enjoyed this one, and if you're a fan of the original, we're always afraid of checking it out, it's actually pretty damn good, so have fun with it. Coming in at number 9 is a David Cronenberg classic, and that is Scanners. Now, this is a film that I'm due for a rewatch. I actually plan on doing a Cronenberg review series at some point this year, so I will have the chance to review this finally at some point very soon. But this is certainly a movie that has a reputation, if nothing else, just for the opening scene with the head explosion. One of the coolest practical gore effects ever put to film, but it is a really cool concept where you have people with these psychic powers, and you basically have this government entity or this corporation that is using all of these psychic power endowed people called scanners for their own nefarious uses. And it's about Michael Ironside's character kind of being like a rebel against that. So you have good scanners and bad scanners. It's a cool movie. It's trippy. It certainly leans on like sci-fi horror, but if you like Cronenberg, you know what to expect here. The movie does peak very early on, though, with that head explosion, but it's a good one. Before I continue on with this top 10, if you are like me and are trying to do some new wellness routines and also having a very busy schedule, then you will probably get a lot of help out of our sponsor, HelloFresh. A new year means a new you, and with all of us gearing up for the next 12 months and most of us incorporating new wellness routines into our daily life, schedules are getting tighter than ever. And my biggest pitfall whenever I start a new wellness routine is working in the same exact healthy meals into my everyday life, which eventually burns me out and makes me turn to what I call a delicious mistake. But by using HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit service, I'm able to defeat food fatigue with over 30 calorie smart and protein smart options. They come packed with fresh ingredients that are pre-portioned and delivered right to my doorstep. And with the time that I save not having a grocery shop or meal plan, it's a breeze to whip up a home-cooked meal every night of the week. And with plans constantly changing and busy days coming out of nowhere, HelloFresh allows you to change your delivery schedule from week to week. Mix and match lifestyle options like fit and wholesome, family-friendly, or quick and easy to fit the meals to how busy your days are, and even skip a week if you're not able to cook at home. Just open the pre-packed meals and follow the included instruction sheets, and in no time you have a wholesome meal for you and your family that you didn't have to plan or shop for. And for those of you that enjoy Factor meals as much as I do, HelloFresh actually owns Factor, so expect the same level of quality. And since breakfast is the most important meal of the day, HelloFresh is sweetening the deal by offering all subscribers free breakfast for life. That means you'll enjoy a free breakfast item with every single HelloFresh delivery. So if you want to take the stress out of dinner time and help support this channel at the same time, scan the QR code on screen or go to the link in the video description and use my code CODYJAN10 and receive 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life. One breakfast item per box while subscription is active if you're in the US. The link and code are valid in all countries and the respective local discount will apply. And thank you so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Coming in at number 8 is going to be Cloverfield, another one that definitely leans more into the sci-fi side than the horror side, but you definitely got some good horror sequences here with the little bugs and what happens after certain characters get bit. And this has always been one of the very few found footage movies that I actually really enjoy. I like the creature design. I like the way that it's all about like a disaster movie that's told through the perspective of one person that's trying to survive. So you just get glimpses of the monster, you get glimpses of other pieces of it. A lot of it is left up to your imagination of what exactly is happening here. And by the end of it, it sets up a lot of interesting questions that they have yet to pay off on. But supposedly we're getting a direct sequel to this movie soon, so maybe that direct sequel will make this original even better. But yes, while I prefer 10 Cloverfield Lane, Cloverfield is still a very good one. Coming in at number 7, you have Megan, also known as Mathregan, also known as Dollar Store Chucky. What else can I say in here? Yeah, you got Megan, who is the teenage girl Generation Z answer to Child's Play, where there's this companion doll that is being built and designed, and she fixates on this little girl and her friendship with her, and then starts to develop her AI out to where she starts to go a little psycho and actually murders anybody that gets in the way of this girl or tries to hurt her or yells at her. And so this was an enjoyable movie. You know, it's a Blumhouse flick. It came out in January. I don't think any of us were expecting much out of it, but not only was it much better than most of us were expecting, it was a pretty big box office hit, which is why we're getting Megan 2.0 later this year, which I hope I enjoy a little bit more than this one. This one is still fun, but I would have preferred to get the full rated R version that they clearly shot and intended to release at first, rather than them doing the watered down version because of their TikTok fame, and then repackaging the bullshit rated R cut later on, teasing us as if it's a much more violent version when it's actually just a version with a lot more F-bombs. So I do enjoy this movie, but there's things about it that annoys me, but we'll see if the sequel delivers the concept even better. Number 6, you have Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight, another movie that I've been meaning to review for a long time and just haven't seemed to get around to it. This is going to end up being just like a pitch list of a bunch of movies I want to see if you guys want me to review or not. I was really late to the party on this one. I didn't watch this until I was like in my early 20s, maybe even my mid 20s. And it's one that as a kid, I remember Tales from the Crypt being a huge success, but for whatever reason, I just totally missed the boat on it. I was not an avid viewer of that show. And I had seen pieces of Bordello of Blood, which is nowhere near as good. So I think that's the reason why it took so long to actually warm up to watching this one. But when I finally did, this movie is a lot of fun. First of all, the cast I love. I love William Sadler. It's cool to see him as the lead character here. I think Billy Zane is an absolute trip as the villain here. Jada Pinkett Smith, even though I certainly have my feelings about her now, I liked her a lot in this movie and in this role. And it's just a fun little horror comedy. Cool things with the demon effects. You got some really good humor in here. And it's a movie that actually is fairly influential, but nobody seems to ever really credit it. Like The Nun literally steals the climax of this movie, and nobody ever acknowledges that aside from those of us horror fans that know better. So Demon Knight is a lot of fun. It's a movie that if you've ever wondered what the Tales from the Crypt vibe was and just weren't able to watch the TV show, and while we're all waiting on like maybe an official Blu-ray release of that series, check out Demon Knight because you'll have a good time with it. Coming in at number 5, we've got the Wrong Turn remake, and this is one of those movies that gets a lot of hate that I will never understand. I think that this was a fantastic remake. I actually prefer this to the original, while I certainly have my fun with the original, but Wrong Turn as a franchise is never going to be a franchise that gets a lot of love out of me. I think that's one of the worst franchises I've ever covered, but we had played out the whole hillbilly, inbred, cannibal thing to death by the time we got through the 6th Wrong Turn film. So what does this movie do? They take the general concept of a group of young people going out into the woods, taking a wrong turn, and ending up in a really bad situation where they're being hunted. Only this movie flips all of your expectations of what they're going to do to retread that road and do something extremely different with it by having them not be cannibalistic hillbilly mountain men and have them actually be this society that has decided to live in the mountains and has their own barbaric old school like caveman style rules, and the protagonists are actually more so the invaders than the actual mountain men that you would assume would be just flat out evil. Now the movie eventually does show a lot of what these people do that is fucked up and makes them very clearly the villains in this situation, but takes a lot of interesting twists and turns along the way. And I really like the main character and her journey throughout. And it's a movie that I would have liked to have seen a follow-up. I don't know if we're ever going to, because the response that this got certainly didn't seem like it's going to merit a follow-up. A lot of people called it woke turn for reasons that just annoy the living shit out of me. But nonetheless, Wrong Turn, I think it's solid as fuck. And if I'm in the mood for a Wrong Turn experience, I'm certainly only going to pick this or the original, but I think I'm going to pick this one up just a little more often. Coming in at number 4, we got Final Destination 2. And if you had me do this top 10 maybe a year or so ago, this one might have been a little bit higher on this list. This used to be my favorite of the Final Destination movies, but for some reason on my most recent rewatch, I fell slightly out of love with it. Now, I still am a big fan of it. It's very high on this list, but I used to adore this movie. To me, this took the concept of the original film and pushed it into a much more comical direction where the deaths were more over the top. The release of tension elicited more of like a nervous laugh when you just see somebody get splatted and you're like, oh my God, okay, there it is. Whoo, that was wild. Versus the first one that was much more like on your edge and scary. So this one I've always appreciated for that, having much more over-the-top kills, some of the best kills in the franchise without fully going CGI, which they do from 3 onward. And I do mostly like the characters here. I don't think they're as fleshed out as 1, maybe not even fleshed out as the 3rd film or the 5th film, but there's an interesting group of characters here, and I think they do a decent enough job at tying it back to the first film, having the characters be somebody who lived only because of the intervention of the characters of the first film, and giving you a loose tie to the first one without being over-explaining and over-lore-heavy. Coming in at number 3, we've got Scream 5, also known as Scream, but why? Now, this movie has certainly fallen out of grace slightly because of how poorly, in my opinion, they followed it up with Scream 6, and then, of course, all the drama that happened with what was originally going to be Scream 7. So it's going to eventually feel like a little weird side chapter in the Scream lore, number 5 and number 6. But taking it on its own merits, I really enjoy Scream 5. I think that they do a good job at actually rebooting this franchise, at, again, like most of the other Scream movies, tying themselves back to the original and having like a very meta commentary on requels and legacy sequels without getting overly silly with it. I think that the throwback side of it is really enjoyable, going back to the Mocker House and things like that. And I really do like the kills here. Now, I've never been overly fond of the creativity with the kills in Scream. I found them to be mostly reliant on stabs, and I wish they'd get a little more intense. But they're bloody and they're a little bit more mean in this one, so I appreciate that. And I really like all the characters. And despite me being somebody who seems to have an unpopular opinion that I don't really need the original 3 characters in all of my Scream movies anymore, the 5th film actually gave me a bit of what I wanted with the fate of certain characters and with how much of the runtime other characters are actually in the film, making way for a brand new set of characters to carry on the legacy. So that was what I liked about it initially. Now that kind of seems all for naught with where we're going to be going now in Scream 7. But nonetheless, always enjoyed this one. It was a very nice surprise for especially a January release. Coming in at number 2, we've got Split. Now, this is a film that, again, kind of rides that line horror and thriller, but fuck it, we're going to throw it on here anyway. And this was the comeback story for M. Night Shyamalan. Now, he has since squandered that quite a bit, unfortunately, at least in my opinion, but Split was the movie that, at this point, nobody expected anything from this guy. Everybody figured anything that he does is probably going to be, at best, disappointing, at worst, one of the worst films of the year. And even though Split seemed like an interesting concept, it was like, but it's M. Night. He's going to find a way to fuck this up. And so you watch this, and not only does it have just an outstanding performance from James McAvoy and multiple amazing performances from him, but Anya Taylor-Joy also does a really good job, and it's just a tight little horror thriller. It goes back to basics. It just puts characters in a really creepy situation, lets James McAvoy just have a blast going to all these different places with his character, and by the end of it pulls off one of the most genuinely awesome surprises that I've ever had in a theater, where I definitely liked this movie, but then as soon as that music cue happened at the very end of the film, I was like, oh my God, are they actually going there? And they did. Now, a lot of people, more people than not, were massively disappointed with what we got as a follow-up to Split. So unlike Scream 5, where this franchise goes in the future did not taint my enjoyment of this film at all, and it still ends up being one of M. Night's best films. I think it's in my top 4. It's very high up there, so always enjoyed Split. But coming in at number 1 for me is a film that I actually saw in theaters January, the year that it released, and it's From Dusk Till Dawn. I was 6 years old watching this movie. And it's because it's advertised as like this little action vampire romp. And not until you go see the movie do you realize how adult it really is, with it being a strip joint and Quentin Tarantino dialogue certainly going full rated R in a lot of moments. So my first viewing experience of this, there was a lot of eyes being covered and ears being covered. But nonetheless, as I've grown up, this has been a movie that has always been one of my favorites. It's certainly schlocky. Some of the effects don't hold up at all, with where even in the 90s they didn't hold up very well. Some really cool ideas and some very cool concepts, and also just seem to go way too far into the silly, but that's also kind of part of the charm of this movie. And this is one of those weird examples of a movie that is just an absolute blast to watch with somebody that doesn't know what's coming. Because unlike most movies, this thing has a major twist halfway through, like a complete genre push to being a completely different film in the back half. And the movie gives no hints of that. So if you're ever lucky enough to watch this with somebody that doesn't know this is a vampire film, it's a really entertaining moment to just watch them when that turns on. But even knowing that it was a vampire film, it's just a really cool little project here, where half of it is straight up crime thriller, Quentin Tarantino dialogue fueled, awesome characters, really scummy people that you can't help but like on some weird level, and then just a full-on vampire romp in the second half, gore fest. So this has always been one of my favorite vampire flicks, one of my favorite horror movies of all time, despite its flaws. It's just a big nostalgic grin on my face. So as far as January released horror films that I have seen, my number one is From Dusk Till Dawn. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for all of my 2025 new release reviews, and click over here for a vampire top 10 to celebrate my number one, From Dusk Till Dawn. Like, share, hit that subscribe button. Be sure to check out HelloFresh down in the video description below. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.